Eric, man, thanks so much for coming on the show here today. Really excited to have you on. Could you start by just telling us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Mike, for having me. I'm director of strength and conditioning at George Washington University here in Washington, D.C. I just finished 3 years here. Prior to that, I was assistant strength and conditioning coach at the University of Illinois at Chicago for a total of 8.5 years, starting as a volunteer intern, then a paid intern, and then a full-time while getting my master's there as well. So yeah, I've been in college strength and conditioning for over 10, 11 years now, so which is kind of crazy to think about. But yeah,
Yeah.
I am.
I love it, man. And I always love to talk about people's, I just think of like, I love superheroes. So I love to hear about people's origin stories. So like, what got you into physical preparation, strength and conditioning? Like, what was your path into this field?
Yeah, I was always obsessed with improvement or interested in improvement growing up. I
Mm,
played all kinds of sports. Fortunately, a small town in Iowa. I played baseball, basketball, football, soccer, pretty much everything growing up. And it was like one season to the next. You just kind of keep rolling to the next year. Basketball's over, but the weather starts getting nice, so you're going to play outside.
yep.
And then baseball, we had summer baseball in Iowa, so you kind of play it, have something to do year round. Um,
Yeah.
from these more specific strength and conditioning, I had a really good anatomy and physiology class my junior year of high school.
Mm,
I was interested in it prior, but that really kind of helped solidify my interest in the body and just a lifelong love of learning. My
yep.
grandfather was a professor in entomology,
Oh, wow.
but just like loved reading and help instill that just like a professor's mindset or a knowledge.
Curious mindset, right?
Yeah, um, and then I played football at University of Iowa from 2007 to 2011. I was a punter, and I was thinking going into college, either college, be a football coach or a strength coach. And I knew going to
Mm,
University of Iowa with their great program and strength and conditioning is a big piece, has been and continues to be a big piece of their development of their
yeah.
athletes. And I knew even if I never played a down of football, I might have a good connection with Chris Doyle, the strength coach, in that
Yes.
tree. And it turned out that was the case. I did play my senior
Yep.
year, but I ended up with connecting with my boss at UIC, Nick Sistadas. So it kind of led to when I was done with football to that opportunity.
Yeah.
Back to the improvement. I just saw once you saw what college football coaching was at the time, and even more so now, you don't get the opportunity to work with the kids or the athletes year round. You have the season from August through December, January, and then 4 or 5 weeks in spring ball. I feel like as a strength coach, I get to work with the athletes year round and have a bigger impact, not just as athletes, but as people. Additionally, too, in the Olympic side, there's a little bit more job security. There's never any 100% job security in sports.
Right.
But there is, I also like, there's not one sport I love so much. Like, oh, I got to work with basketball. I got to work with football. I like the variety because there's a lot you can pull from different sports and take to others. The principles can apply across.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I've always tried to express to young strength coaches is, hey, just be a sponge. Even if you played basketball and you want to be in basketball, when you're young in your career, just pull from anything, right? And work with as many different teams and as many different athletes as you can because you're always learning and stuff that you pick up. Like we'll talk about gymnastics later. Working with gymnastics, maybe you're going to take that into, someday when you're working with basketball full time, you're like, oh, this worked really well there. It just gives you such a broader range of experiences to pull from, especially when you're young, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've seen that like at UIC, we had some interns that just wanted to work. In the summer, we mainly had basketball and volleyball around.
Sure.
And they were like, just really wanted to work with men's basketball. It's like, well, you're missing the opportunity to work with 30 other athletes on campus and get a lot of reps coaching. So
Yes.
sometimes being so blinders on early on can be a downside.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then last but not least, I mean, you kind of already carved this out, but I would love to hear just like the evolution as you were at UIC and then to where you're at now. So like maybe just talk a little bit about like when you came in, what were your roles and responsibilities and how did that grow and evolve into where you're at now?
Yeah, I think I was fortunate, right time, right place. So I volunteer interned the summer of 2013 at UIC. And so similarly to other interns we had, it was, I lived on campus because I didn't know I was coming from Iowa. I wanted to be right there. So I could roll out of bed at 5:30 and be in the facility at 5:32, right?
Yeah.
And
Yep.
I loved it. Like I could spend as much time there as I could. And I think I did a good enough job and had the background of my time at Iowa and the science behind it that they were starting the women's soccer program that fall. And so fortunately they had a position like $10,000 for a paid internship that year. And so it was women's soccer, which had 5 athletes for that year, just training. So it's like,
Yeah.
you do in a team training, then a lot of 2v2s, a lot of small sided, no large
Right.
games when you just have 5
Yeah.
athletes and a lot of conditioning, a lot of lifting.
Yeah.
So that was fun to kind of start the program from the ground up. And then the other 2 teams I worked with directly were women's golf and women's gymnastics. And women's gymnastics was the one sport I could actually see because golf goes to Florida. They go off wherever to compete.
Sure.
And even at home, being in the city in Chicago, it's not like there's a golf course right there. So they would go out to the suburbs. So it's not like I could easily go to practice or see their competition.
Right.
So gymnastics was the one I could go to practice occasionally. I could see their competitions at home. And so that created a lot of buy-in with the athletes. But getting back to that evolution, like I was 2 weeks away from probably moving back home to Iowa. I had to take a few $1,000 loan from my parents just to stay in Chicago at the time. Fortunately, I had good scholarship at Iowa, so I had no college debt, but I had no money either.
Right.
And I found a part-time paid job at GNC, and that helped support the paid internship. And Nick was great about scheduling, and I helped with as many of the other teams as I could. And that was kind of the start of it. And then the evolution, then that spring, I was continuing to intern, but then interviewing for grad assistant positions. I interviewed at Northwestern, did horrible. Not like, but think about it like this. It'd be like coming in as a freshman and maxing out. You're probably not prepared for that. I was not prepared for that. I didn't have the reps at that time, confidence or ability at that time. And so that was a good learning perspective for me, but I was doing a good job every day and developing. And so Nick, even I think he knew in the back of his head, he didn't want me to get that role because his assistant was running a CrossFit gym out of our weight room at night. And he had decided the time was right to move down the street and open a brick and mortar. And so he had a full-time position coming open that next fall. So right time again, and slid right into that full-time role that next fall. So that was kind of the brief evolution of the positions. But then from a coaching standpoint, it was a kind of a long evolution. I had a good background, so we had very comprehensive strength training. I would say our training at Iowa was West Side mixed with Olympic lifting, mixed with Mike Boyle. Because Chris Doyle.
That's a pretty broad mix right there, man.
So it's like very, I think, well-rounded, a lot of unilateral.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Chain, just good training. And the development was evident, both personally and across the team, as you see all the walk-ons or 2-stars that end up with long NFL careers from Iowa.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that was that. But then, we can get into more of the training aspects later. But it was an evolution over those 8.5 years.
Yeah, I love it. And it's funny because I kind of think of today's, at least some of the primary theme of today's show, it's kind of like the business of collegiate S&C, right? Mm-hmm. Like there's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes. And obviously we can talk training some, but man, like there's a lot of stuff that you do in your role that I would not have thought about, right? Or things that are very similar to me when I was running iFast, like the day-to-day business side of that. So you talked about hiring, right? And how poorly you did with that first interview. Let's talk hiring. Like, let's just start there. What are some of the key traits that you're looking for in somebody when you're going into that first interview with them?
Yeah, and I've been fortunate with that in our my 3 years here. Our structure is we have 7 staff members, including myself, 4 full time, and then 3 graduate assistants. And the graduate assistants is typically a 2-year program, so and it's kind of been balanced 1 and 2. So every year we're hiring someone, and
Yeah,
within
for sure.
year we'll be posting again for our grad position, and again, fortunate our exercise there's a master's in exercise science and strength with a concentration in strength and conditioning. So they have get a good solid background there,
Yep.
classes, but then it's also not so demanding that they can't coach a lot.
Yes.
But in terms of the hiring process, we really try to look at good people first. We can make them a better strength coach. The kind of framework we like is from Patrick Lencioni's ideal team player of humble, hungry, and smart. And so we kind of look at those. There's a really good free PDF online of interview question guide. And so we take some of those and try to target, are we looking for more humble, hungry, smart and people smart, not just intelligence? And so some of the questions can kind of help guide you what to ask and how to look for their answers. What are you really looking for? And then you just kind of collect a lot of other interesting or thoughtful interview questions that try to dive in, not just sets and reps and some of that, but it is also, we want to get a sense of that too, because coming in, we try to put a lot of, we treat them like a full-time staff member, essentially, as much as we can with a development mindset.
Yeah, no, I love that. I just did a podcast, I think it was with Anthony Donskoff a while back, and he was asking me about the traits that I would look for when I was either hiring a new coach or an intern, or now if we're bringing somebody like an independent contractor into our gym. Mm-hmm. And the 3 things that I always talk about are they got to be curious, right? They got to ask questions, which we've already kind of agreed is a really important trait to have. They got to be hardworking, right? And I know you have that kind of in there. And then personality, right? And they got to be a people person. I think the longer I was in the space, the more I trended towards, hey, if this person has the first 2 and they're just like a rock star human being, everything that we do going forward is going to be so much easier, because you can't, that's like the hardest part to develop, right? Like you can teach somebody sets, reps, coaching cues, all that, but trying to make somebody like a better human being or make them care more about people is a lot more challenging.
Yeah. And it's hard. Like even with athletes, same true with our staff. It's like, I don't really not believe in motivation. Motivation's a thing, but it has to come from within, I think, too. So trying to circle in on where their motivations are their growth mindset, what level is their ego, because everyone has ego, but how can that drive them to be better, and will they raise their hand? I think that's something we've talked about a little more lately with GAs and interns, is like raise your hand and step up and volunteer to help do whatever needs to be done, because we don't make people guard their desks, but there is like a requisite amount of time. We think about periodizing your career, periodizing just like our athletes. Like as a younger coach, you need more reps coaching and people move and programming. So that's what we try to give them. None of them have. It's also too, it's like, am I doing them a disservice? We have, because of our staff size, no one works with more than 4 teams. Like when I was Nick's assistant, I had 9 teams.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's like, you go back and look at your Google Calendar, like, how did I do that? But
right.
Our men's basketball guy, Handy, was at George Mason for 27 years. We were able to over coming up on 2 years this spring. But same thing, he was a GA at Illinois back in the day. And it's like, he was in 6 to 6. Like, you've done that. Yeah. I think you need to do that at some point. Not saying you should do it forever, but like talk with the interns, you need to taste that, because you may go to a small school and you're the only person. Like, or you and an assistant, or you're the assistant. So you need to not be afraid of. I don't like the word grind. It's not a grind, but we get to wear T-shirts and shorts and listen to music and watch people sweat. But
work out all day. Yeah. No, I love that, and I always say that too. It's like, that's not like a long-term plan for success. But early in your career, where you don't have a lot of other things going on in your life and you don't have a lot of other responsibilities, that is the time if you're going to do it. And like, I don't know, like putting the time in, working with as many athletes as you can. I remember when we were at Ball State, I think there was 4 or 5 of us that were really committed. And so we had our primary teams, but we all just liked working together and we liked working.
Mm-hmm.
So we would go out and we'd work with everybody's teams, And I think when you do that, not only does it give you the reps, but you get to understand and like taste the cultures too in the different sports. Cause hey man, men's basketball is a lot different than women's soccer, which is a lot different than, the women's running team.
Yep.
It's just kind of all over the place. So just being able to kind of infuse yourself around all those different athletes, I think is really valuable early on.
We talk about, sometimes we make our interns watch WWE intro videos because it's like you have to put on, you have to put on that sometimes. Like personally, I'm an introvert. I don't like talking to people all day, but ironically, that's my job is I'm around people all day.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I go home to my family and just want to stare at a wall, but it's like, and my wife loves it as an extrovert, works mostly remote. And so she just needs to talk to have human interaction. So it's ironic that way. But that's the point we make to the interns and the younger coaches is like, you have to turn the dial up and down. You're not going to go into golf with the same intensity of a football or baseball. So learning to dial that up and down, but they're still both can get quality training, and they're all there for the same reason to get better.
I love that. I love the idea of the dial. And like you, it's weird because I'm in coaching. I mean, I've got a podcast, so I do all these things, but I'm an introvert too. So I just think of it as, hey, there's times of the day where you got to put the extrovert hat on, go in, smile, clap, turn the music up, whatever, but you got to turn the dial up. I love that. Okay. So interview tips, right? And this could be almost like coming full circle. If you could give your young self some interview tips, what would you suggest? Or maybe some things, because you've probably done a lot of interviews. What are some do's and what are some don'ts for young coaches going into an interview?
Yeah. Reflecting back on my interview at Northwestern, it was just, I would have practiced more, almost similarly to the CSCCA, like the practical, didn't do like understanding what was to come. And part of that is like, maybe that's on me. Maybe I could have asked better questions heading up, like, hey, what can I expect? So trying to think that through, but that just takes, I think, time. For us, we typically, our process will start like, we'll post the position or start accepting applications. They email with a resume, cover letter, references. And then with the GAs, I actually request a 3-minute or less, an unlisted YouTube video of them coaching either someone or themselves, a teaching progression of a power clean or back squat.
Love it.
Less than 3 minutes, unlisted. So a few little details. If they don't read everything, if it's not unlisted, if it's over 3 minutes, I generally don't even.
Done.
And it's not really even, I don't care if you can coach or not. I mean, I do. It helps. But can you follow those small directions? Like if you can't follow those directions, I'm probably can't trust you with a team, a baseball team or a cross country team, and not have to like hold your hand on everything. So that's a little like filter. May not necessarily disqualify you, but most likely it's going to move you down a notch. So pro tip for anyone.
I like that.
That's going to apply. But then within that, I'll go through the resumes and then start with try to do a brief phone interview. Really just, you get a sense of a couple questions, get to know them a little bit. Because I feel like most interviews within the first 5 minutes, you can kind of tell, do you jive with this person?
Right.
And then beyond that, once we take the kind of top people from that, we'll go to a Zoom format. And with the GAs, it's all Zoom. We can't bring people in. Full-time is different. Like we were hiring this last summer, spring and summer, for our women's basketball position. And so we were able to bring people on campus, depending on, that gets into more HR aspects. And learning about that was fun. The previous year when we hired, I was actually out for paternity leave. So I was kind of started the process, but didn't finish it anyways. But for the graduate assistants, then we'll do a Zoom, and we try to include as many of our staff on those as well, including the current graduate assistants, because we want them, interviews go both ways. So get a sense of, these are the people you're going to be sitting in the 88 square foot office with. for the next 2
Yes.
years. So
Yes.
1 to 2 years. So, and then we kind of believability weight everyone's feedback. So we'll have the staff rank them or give their opinions on them, just have a shared notes. And then we kind of go from there. Maybe have a third round and ask for like a programming sample. I'll give an example of like Casey, who we just hired this last spring. She had a decent phone interview. I put her in kind of the middle round, and I've told her this, so I can share it.
Yeah.
And then she, on her own, followed up with a like needs analysis and programming of a women's soccer team, like out of the blue. I was like, okay, that like piqued. Let me put her.
Absolutely.
We'll give her a Zoom interview, and then she did great. Like was much more comfortable, and we ended up hiring her. So it's like going that extra above and beyond, and that was what we were looking for in terms of that the hungry aspect was a big focus for us last year, and we feel like we got that. So that's don't be afraid to send those extra, even though sometimes I get a ton of emails, may not always respond as quickly as I would like, but I try to, and those are appreciated. They are seen at least.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And if you are ever in this situation in your career where you're hiring somebody, I just want to echo the point of some of these pre-interview filters, because we would do the same things, right? When we were hiring interns, we started making them do videos, right? And so we actually made them do two. One was just like, hey, why would you be a good fit for iFast? And so there you could kind of tell, have they done any homework, right? Are they just fishing for an internship, or do they actually know who we are and what we represent? And then the second one was coaching. So we would do those even when we would hire office managers, right? It was like, hey, we need it in a manila folder. I want your cover letter, resume, references, and then just a Post-it note on the top, or a short, blurb about why you'd be a good fit for iFast. Little things like that. And when people email you their stuff, or they don't do it in order, like if they can't follow directions to get the job, they're not going to follow directions when they actually have the job. No. So little stuff like that will save you so much time, right?
Yeah.
As far as like on the back end, you don't have to interview 30 people now. You have to interview 5.
Yeah. No, and the other thing is like resumes is like spice them up. There's so many like black and white Microsoft Word. Like, also tell me how you've done things. It's a little trickier when you're younger. You don't have that experience. But if you're coaching, don't just tell me, designed and implemented programs for these teams. Like, what are what improvements did you help bring along? Like, show those actual data and statistics. I know that helped me. I think going into getting this role, because I didn't have any direct connections. This was a blind application.
Oh wow!
And
here you are, man.
I don't know how it worked, but it did. So,
I love it.
Yeah, putting color on there. Like, there's some good articles out there. Scott Kuhn had some on resumes and another thing is a portfolio, like either on Keynote or is where I built mine, and that obviously comes with time and having results. But you can kind of lay out your vision, your principles, and it just looks professional. So like I interviewed when I was assistant at UIC, interviewing for head positions. I was a D3 position. The AD, I sat down with him. He had it printed out on his desk. He's like, I don't even need to ask you any questions. You know what you're doing. Like, this is it. So it did the interview for you. And that's something I encourage our GAs to start building, because that's something you can send either as a primer before an interview or as a post follow-up. Like, hey, thanks for meeting. Here's my portfolio, where we talked about a lot of this, just as a kind of reminder and refresher. Because I think that as a hiring manager, you want things to stand out to you.
Yeah, well, it sets you apart. It's so funny you mentioned this, because I had totally forgotten about this. I actually did this in like 2000, right? Or 2002, when I was applying for jobs, I created like a PowerPoint. And keep in mind, not only just PowerPoint, but I had to burn it, right? It's not like you could send these big files. I burned it to like a CD or DVD and sent it or mailed it to people. But that's exactly what I was talking about, right? Like, what's my philosophy? What do I believe in? How am I going to help your athletes? Who were my roles and responsibilities? So that's really cool. I love that. I would love to hear a little bit more because I'm always interested in this side of it. What does your education process look like for your GAs, your interns, and people you're trying to level up?
Yeah, that's something we're always trying to improve. So trying to accelerate that onboarding process. When I got
Yep.
here, what's nice is like the house wasn't burning down, but we had been without a director for I think about a year or so. So they were trying
Okay.
more of a shared model, and then it was finally after COVID, they got the funding. It was like it's time to get a director, and so it's just more like a
Sure.
singular vision.
Yep.
And so, but there was like people that had come in and had like 4 or 5 teams GAs and like not really any direction because there was no one, and it's not their fault, no one's fault. It's just what it was. And
Right.
COVID, it was a little crazy, as we all know. So
For sure.
a lot of it was just trying to create continuity. Have, hey, you're going to be here 2 years, but can we try to get you with those same teams for that time? Some of the things we'll do is every semester we'll have full-time and GA pairings. And so each coach is just paired with a full-time and they go to a session and vice versa. So the full-time will go to the GA's session. Just observe. It also provides a chance to get to know other athletes
Sure.
of teams you don't normally work with. And then it's almost like coach to coach. So both full-time to GA and GA to full-time. And just a chance to see more coaching and see more different ways of doing what we do. We have some assessments or just kind of self rubrics we'll do 2 to 3 times a year, and it's just kind of 4 categories of their communication, their weight room organization, their coaching, and then self development and like reading books, podcasts, videos, etc. And so just them assessing themselves, and then from the sport coaches, we have an assessment we give them after their championship season. It's less about is their strength coach good at strength coaching, because that's my job to evaluate. But
Right.
it's more how's their communication? Do they ask about the sport? Are they an extension of your staff? And trying to dial into some of those things to help them develop. I meet weekly with the GAs and then bi-weekly with our full-time. So just create space for more one-on-one. And then we've been better this year with weekly staff meetings. Very brief, but just getting us all in the same room, because we have 3 weight rooms in 2 different buildings across 2 campuses. So it's just, and college sports, we're going from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. In various times, right, around academics and weight room schedules, class practice schedules. So just getting us all in the same room is nice, because that's when the magic happens, is when we're together. So trying to create more of those organic situations.
Well, it's just, it makes for a better team environment, right, is what I've found. And we weren't, again, I think back to like when IFAST was coaches and interns and the way we had it set up for many, many years. And sometimes it's hard, right? Because you got your morning coach, right? He's there like 6 to noon, he or she. And then you got your afternoon coach. They're there more like 3 to 8. You got your interns that are spread out throughout the day. You got me, Bill. Everybody's kind of coming and going at their own rate. Getting everybody in the same room, number one, to just interact, right? It improves the culture, right? Like you said, that's when the magic happens, as far as like, hey, we're bouncing ideas off each other. Somebody's struggling with something. Well, a lot of times it's Bill, because, Bill's got like the glasses, and he's like looking down at you like this. And, but it just makes for such dynamic learning environments, right? Versus, a podcast like this. I think this is valuable, right? But being in a room with other like-minded individuals where you've got that constant back and forth, that's when you can really learn and grow. And I feel like that's such an important piece of your growth process as a coach.
Well, that was kind of the evolution for us at UIC. It was originally just Nick and myself, and then we grew out to a staff of 4 or 5. And so kind of the learning for me and some of the disconnects between us and administration or at UIC was like we didn't have to have policies and procedures or a staff meeting, because he'd been there so long. And my desk was outside his office in the weight room. So it's like literally my desk and then a barbell, which would be like a basketball coach having a desk on the court. But anyways, it's like we didn't have to have that. So that's one thing that I really focused on coming in, was like reaching out to the sport administrators and the other stakeholders beyond just the sport coaches and the athletes. Yeah, you need, quote, buy-in, but there's so much we do of the science and the thought and the evidence-based, principles-based planning. It's not just us lifting weights and yelling and screaming.
Right.
Right. Music, those are fun perks of it, but from the outside, the weight room can be an intimidating place to people that don't understand that. So it's trying to break those walls down. So one of the things we do is send a weekly recap email that we have a template, and everyone does this, including the GAs. And so that's a big piece of like bridging that gap, and it includes all the stakeholders, academics, myself, our director of sports medicine, and then the direct ones, pieces that work with those teams. So that's been good, and good feedback from the administrators to like, to see a piece of that, what you're doing, what's coming up as well. And so just keeping everyone on the same page has been beneficial.
Yeah, the communication's huge for sure. Something I always like to know as well is, obviously when a GA comes in, or like maybe a new coach comes in, they don't go from 0 to 100, right? I would love to hear, how do you ramp up their roles and their responsibilities? How do they earn your trust to where you feel comfortable letting them train your athletes?
Yeah, it really starts during the interview process, I think, because you get to know their strengths and weaknesses, what their background is, so that can kind of help us onboard them. One thing we started this last summer, I think that was beneficial, is doing weekly calls with the incoming and sending more materials out, like, hey, read this, look over, watch this video, and then just having more touch points before they actually, because they don't get paid till September, and so we don't usually make them come till that August to give them
sure,
before, get your keys, get your cards, all that stuff. But yeah, it's and then when they come, trying to sit down with them and get them on the same page with their sport coaches and meet everyone, because sometimes it is kind of a quick ramp up. So Charlie, who just started this fall, he's got water polo is one of his teams. They start right when school starts and start competing right away. They're fall sports, so it's kind of a quick, like, you're there, and there's no haven't been training with us since the spring, so it's kind of a quick turnaround. So you do kind of have to hit the ground running. I also put a lot of stock in them coaching and having that experience, because I had afforded that when I was a paid intern and starting at UIC. I think because I had a good background, I could be trusted with that. So I didn't have a lot of oversight. So we do meet, but that's something I'm trying to find, that balance of guiding and holding their hand versus just prescribing.
Yes.
We're not there yet, but we continue. I probably give too much, like Sophia and Isaac, my first two GAs I hired, just finished, and they both got jobs. So good on them. It was probably, there's only so much time in the day. And I think I was out at a wedding the week before school started. And I was like, I can't do that again, because they're have like Sophia in front of 60 rowers and like no help. So just trying to learn from that and help. Every time we do it, it gets better and better, and giving a little more clear directions, expectations, and then holding the hand and helping them with programming, and then start to pull back as they get more comfortable.
Yes. Yeah. It's definitely a transition process, right? And you want them to be successful. And I think early on, I don't know, maybe it was just me, but I felt like I wanted them to be like a miniature version of me, right? Like, I know what I'm doing. I want you to do it like this. And over time, it's like you start to let them kind of show their own personality. Hey, it doesn't have to be exactly like me. As long as we're still kind of in the same sandbox, then we're going to be just fine. And so that, like, I think that's partly just maturation of ourselves as like mentors or as people that are hiring and educating young coaches. But yeah, I think anytime we can kind of let them grow into their own space and their own coaching style, ultimately it will help them be more successful, right?
Yeah. That's why I like, how do I get my 10 plus years of experience into this person in 1 or 2 years? I don't know how to do that, but some of things just take time. But can I try to expose them to different videos, articles, thought processes, that will help accelerate their progress. I think that's the goal.
Yeah, I love it. Okay. So with that being said, what can your young coaches, so interns, GAs, first years, what can they do to level up on their own outside of being in the weight room?
I think it's getting under the bar or in the blocks, or it's like training, make sure they're training, because it's kind of, you want to be exposed to a lot of types of training to learn what works, but also long enough to know if it works. And also
Yes.
understanding that you are an N of one, but you have different experiences or backgrounds than your athletes do. So being able to filter that out, I think. And then from a learning standpoint is building your filter. I've heard you talk about this. I've talked about this with a lot of colleagues as well. It's like there's so much information at their fingertips.
Yes.
How do you know what's good or not? And then how do you take out those principles? Can you trace it back to the source? Like a lot of what we've done or are doing has been done before. Not to say there's not new and novel or different ways of doing it and can push things forward, but appreciating what's done before, and are you tracing it back to where it came from? And from that person, where did they get it? So
Yes.
trying to get exposed to more of those things and see where those principles actually come from.
I love that. And again, when you hear like people talk about speed work, you know, and I'm just using an example here because obviously you were talking about using some West Side,
Mm-hmm.
right? You know, okay, well then we go to West Side. Well, where was Louis pulling it from? Well, he was pulling it from Verkhoshansky, you know. So working your way backwards, I think, is so valuable. And then you really get an understanding of, okay, if you go all the way back, well, what was that person's intent, right? And then you kind of like figure out each step along the way. How is this person changing it or manipulating it to make it work in their context or in their environment? And I think that's like, it's just great homework, right?
Yeah. Well, it's like even with the social media and stuff now, I've been thinking about this is like, all right, let's say I've read your articles on T Nation. So if you say
Yep.
something, I kind of know the filter of where you're coming from. Mike
Right.
Vale, for example, will tweet something. I know
Yep.
I've listened to almost all of his podcasts and read articles.
Yep.
So it's like, I have that, can understand he's coming from this perspective, where if you just see something random, you don't have that. I
Yes.
think building that and understanding context and how it affects content, I think is very important.
Agreed. Agreed. Okay. So I'm actually excited to talk to you about this next part because something I never thought about until you kind of proposed this to me when we were going back and forth in email before the show was budget. And obviously I was a gym owner, so I think about budget and adding equipment and all that. But what does that look like in the collegiate sector? Like, what are you even thinking about when it comes to budget?
Yeah, this was something I wasn't really exposed too much from until I was director. We had a very small budget at UIC. Like, we didn't even have money for supplements for the athletes.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
One semester we got like 12 grand and we got chocolate milk and applesauce. Yay.
Yay. Winning.
But then the evolution here, I got here, our financial manager had just taken another position. So I didn't even see our budget. I started here in December of 21, and then like that February maybe. And so getting a grasp of that. But I'm not going to mention numbers just because it's so relative and depends where you're at. But we've been able to grow our budget. We've doubled it essentially in the 3 years.
Oh, wow.
And I think a lot of that is those getting the stakeholders and understand we're one of us athletic training and academics. We work with every student athlete. We're the boots on the ground and can impact so many.
Yes.
We have I think it's like 30,000 athlete exposures each year.
Oh my gosh.
Contacts.
Wow.
So understanding that from our budget standpoint, I kind of split it up into 3 areas. Our financial people are awesome. They're like, as long as you stay under the number, you're good. Other places may be a lot more like you have to project exactly this and do this. You might fundraise. We don't necessarily have to do that at this point. I think it would help if we did. But it's essentially supplements and fueling, which is currently under our budget. At some point, I'd like to break that out just to simplify and try to grow each.
Sure.
And then continuing education for our group. So really value that development. And then it's equipment, maintenance as well as upgrades. And so those are the 3 pillars. I would say people don't tell me your values, show me your budget, because that's what you invest money in is what you
I
will.
like that.
So those are
So talk, yeah, so talk to me, like, how do you think about that, right? Like when you're setting out whatever arbitrary number this is, like I would assume like supplements, that's kind of its own thing, right? Like you said. But like how do you go about, like, is it just, hey, what Con Ed courses are coming up, or what pieces of equipment? Like, could you just walk me through your thought process a little bit there? Because I think that'd be really interesting.
yeah. From the equipment standpoint, I'll start there because it's like we have pretty much anything you'd need. Like there's
Yeah.
benches, there's weights, there's kettlebells, bands. We have some Kaisers, we have like stuff. So it's really, you can get anything done with anything. You find a way or make one. But so that's where it's
Yeah.
like we didn't have to go buy a bunch of stuff. So we can kind of plan out. And so that's with working with my supervisor is like try to, project in the next few years. Do we need to replace anything? Is it the benches are wearing or, kind of building those things out. But one of my goals is each room to be as similar as possible. The two rooms in our Smith Center are both about 1,500 square feet. The room in our Mount Vernon campus is 6,500 square feet, and it's got turf down.
Big space.
Yeah,
It's a big space. It's nice.
A true performance facility. So that's the goal.
Yeah.
But in general, in those spaces, can we make them as similar as possible so you can train any team anywhere and do anything you want? So train in any style, whether
I like
the
that.
principles are the same, but all of us could change at some point. And so even thinking about our facilities planning and long term, if we get a new performance facility or a basketball weight room, try to have it be as modifiable or flexible, because you might have an Olympic lifter style, you might have a HIIT trainer. You don't want to be locked into doing this because we're in this facility, essentially. So that's the goal from a director standpoint, is try to outfit everything. And fortunately, we're pretty well stocked in that area. So it's just trying to refine. All right, we got DC blocks for the Lloyd gym, so now they can do that. They don't have kettlebells. Maybe that's on the list a few years down the line. It's just like trying to keep things nice in terms of, all right, we're short some change plates, so ordering more change 2.5s and 5s to make sure they're balanced. Stuff like that. And then, hey, we want to be cutting edge and push some things. So, all right, we got 16 VBT units this fall. So that was on the list. And be able to source those and make the decision to pull the trigger on that when we felt good about it. And then at the Lloyd gym, we have a shred mill. We purchased that last year. It's like that's a unique and a large investment, but we feel like that's can really push the needle on some of our outputs of sprinting. So that was important for me and how I like to train my athletes, but also for kind of being at the forefront.
Yes. I love it. I love it. Okay. Big question time, my friend. If you could alter the space-time continuum and give young Eric Guthrie one piece of advice, what would it be?
I was thinking about this. I don't think, obviously the easy answer is like, I wouldn't change anything because I'm here.
Sure.
I think I would show more passion sooner. And because I'm very like a duck, like calm above the surface, but pedaling like hell under. And so I think early on that calmness or steadiness could be taken as not caring. And so I think show that sooner, because I think once I did start to have a little more up and down, I think that brought out that just the athletes or coaches, whomever could see that. And I think I just became better with that. So I would bring that out sooner.
I love that. Okay. Last but not least, we got our lightning round. So for you, I have 5 questions. They are fairly short, but your answer can be as long or short as you like, because one or two of these might require a little bit longer answer. Okay. Number 1, and we may have to do a second show about this at some point in time. You talked about you've trained gymnasts for like 10 plus years now. What are some things you've learned working with that demographic? Because that's one group that I've not worked with like ever.
They are great. They're I call them chicken soup for a strength coach's soul.
I like that.
One, they're kinesthetically aware, so you could tell them,
yes,
move your third toe this 3 degrees, and they could pretty much do that. Now, give them the ball, they can't do that. Sometimes we'll play knockout, and that's pretty comical because that's not a skill set they necessarily have. But extremely strong, hardworking. They've the good discipline. Like that's part of the sport is that. And so and then just generally good people. So they're a lot of fun to work with. It could be 7 a.m. In the middle of the fall training, and they're yelling, "Let's go G-Dub," and happy. And that's the same thing at UIC too. So
Yeah.
just a lot of fun to work with. So that's the biggest thing.
Well, when I was there, you actually had gymnastics in, and they just looked the entire time. I didn't know if it was just that day, but man, they looked like they were having fun the entire time. So
That's just what they are. That's who they are. Yeah. And then, from a training standpoint, I think it's just giving them the resilience to do, like, if you go watch them meet, it's crazy what they do. Like, you're not going to simulate, like, the forces are 9 to 13 times body weight on some of their landings, and like just insane what they do, their speed and power. And even, you think from a plyometric or jumping standpoint, they're a jumping sport, and they're bouncing around on mats and the floor, and do I need to do more jumps? You go watch their practice. They're doing probably thousands of contacts.
yeah.
But we actually do, because trying to give them what they're not getting. So is it deeper ranges of motions? Is it different types of contractions? Is it, above and below the demands of the sport, in different directions, a lot of unilateral, a lot of, maybe rotational, or different planes of movement. So to try to challenge them in that way.
I love it. Okay. Number 2, you were just on my guy Joel Smith's podcast. I've got it downloaded, haven't listened to it yet. Could you give us a 1 to 2 minute summary on your recap of like games and play from that show?
Yeah, we talked a lot about the kind of the games and the movement challenges we've implemented. That's kind of another evolution. We'd played a lot of games at UIC, but it was more like a special, hey, the end of the semester, let's play dodgeball, or
right.
let's play kickball or something like that, where it's becoming a lot more piece of the training. And the evolution, or kind of the impetus for me, especially with gymnastics, one of the feedbacks a year or two ago is like the warm-ups were too similar. And again, take these, graduating seniors anytime, grain of salt. And my thought process was, all right, gymnastics, they're very disciplined and they can do the same thing over and over and over again. Let me give them, kind of match that culture.
Yep.
But I was like, all right, I'll take that feedback, then just try to do same but different. And then in the postseason last year, I was like, I want to make my training more alive, almost as much for myself as for the athletes. So every day I came up with a movement challenge. It could be a handstand for time. It could be a relay race. Could be, a pool noodle game or something like that. So just trying to have something kind of engaging, gets the athletes, they get excited for it. They look forward to what's the movement challenge today. Or sometimes at the end of the semester, I assigned a class, like the juniors had this today or have it today, and they have to approve it with me. So it's not, doing anything too wild, but some of the, like, I think the best one, the captains came up with, they had to write my name barefoot in pen on a piece of paper. And then it was the best. Like, I would never think of that. And I'm like routine based, and it's a lot easier to get, all right, we're going to do the eccentric phase and the isometric phase. And we'll, build up and be I could do the same thing every day or the same template for a long time. And so just trying to have a little bit more aliveness to our training, and it's really helped. Then the hard stuff, or the traditional stuff, much better with more intent.
Oh, absolutely. The buy-in's way higher. We actually talked about this before the show, but like not just like beating the fun out of movement of kids, and this is something I'm always conscious of with an 11 and 13-year-old. I know you got 2 young ones at home, but like trying to make movement fun. It's not training when they're kids, like, hey, try and find ways to get them to move, to explore and enjoy their body, so that they'll find ways to do that forever, right?
Yeah. And I've got young kids. You mentioned your kids. Like, you can see they love movement, and then at some point we condition or drill that out of them. And so it's just kind of sad to see that. So I think one thing that we've centered on, that I took from Tony Holler, is to be the best part of their day. And so that's a big principle for our department. And I think sport coaches should ask this as well, is practice the best part of their day, of our kids' days. If it's not, I think you're doing something wrong. It's like, what are we here for? They're here for a good academic experience and social experience, but we spend a lot of time each week and each day doing this. So not that it's like all high fives and giggles. It's like joy in the work, joy in the process of
Yes.
what we're doing. And then that's how you give them something worth value, worth coming back for. And then they'll come back even harder, and they will be willing to do the work when they see the joy in it and see the value in it.
I love it. I love it. Okay, number 3. We kind of talked about this up front. On the other side, when you're young, you need to probably grind a little bit, work the long hours, work with different teams, all that. At your stage or my stage, how do you go about finding balance between your, job as a collegiate S&C coach director with raising a family?
Still chasing that. My brain never turns off. And I've kind of got within my day, I usually coach in the morning, which is good because I'm more of a morning person. And then I'm more of an administrator in the afternoon. So I can go to other sessions, I can have meetings and all that stuff, work on that stuff. But I don't mind having a drive in and home because that kind of creates a buffer that I can listen to podcasts. I can, just start to de-wind from that and separate. So that's something I'm constantly working on, of being home when I'm home. But as the kids get a little older, I think it's a little easier. I'm a little less tired when they start to sleep through the night. But it's also, I've come around to being a little more open with the athletes on stuff like that, but also still being the thermometer and not the thermostat. And so like the baby might have woken up all night. I might say that, but like, hey, make the point. I'm still here. I'm going to give my best effort, and I'm going to, help you be your best today. So I think it's being vulnerable within that and not just being stone faced. It's maybe different from when I started out, and trying to, I think being more real and authentic with them. They see that, and it just helps tremendously in those relationships.
Yeah, I agree. I love it.
Offering to drive out to my house and babysit the kids.
There's a time that would be nice.
Yeah.
I've had some of my the relationships probably a little bit different, but yeah, no, I had some of my high school girls when I was working with all my soccer girls. They would offer to come and babysit my kids, so that was pretty nice. Okay, number 4. Talk to me about Todd the cat. How did you come up with Todd? I love the name.
All right, so Todd was actually predated myself. So I met my wife in Chicago in 2017. She had adopted Todd 6 weeks prior. So you'd have to ask her in terms of the name. I think it's just a funny name. His middle name is Crash. So it's Todd Crash Sassarosi, my wife's maiden name. And the day she adopted him from the shelter, they got in a car crash. Like a huge truck backed into her friend's car. And
oh my gosh,
crushed them and like totaled the car and then drove off, like a huge dump truck. And so, yeah, where Todd Crash came from. He's got an Instagram.
Todd Crash.
We need to monetize his Instagram, I think, because he's this. I've had a dog growing up, and my wife did as well. Had dogs, but he's the most dog-like cat. He'll play fetch. He'll sit and is the friendliest cat. Not a typical like stereotypical cat at all. So he's really like a dog.
That's so funny. The reason I ask is we have a cat as well. Its name is Steve. So I love cats. My wife came up with that. And he is the most Steve cat you can imagine. Like he's like a human. He wakes us up at 5 a.m. and then he goes and naps the rest of the day. And so pretty funny. Pretty funny.
There you go.
Okay. Last but not least, number 5. What's next for Eric Guthrie? What are you working on? What are you excited about? Anything?
It's really just continuing to get better at this. I think growing out our department. We got new AD this fall. Ironically, the AD we had at UIC my last 2 years. So I think.
Oh wow, that's crazy.
I've joked with him. I was like, you're following me around. So growing those relationships, and so working on some like facilities master planning projects. So trying to do big things here, but then continuing to build our brand at GW and serve the athletes better and build out what we're doing. But then personally, it's not really ready yet, but trying to upscale a side hustle, right? Everyone's got a side hustle, but
for sure,
I'm not in a rush to do that, but just build that out because I think it could help financially,
absolutely,
myself, and then also like helping mentor the younger GAs. It's like, hey, this is probably something you should do. We're in a field that doesn't always get rewarded monetarily, and that's not the only driver. But it is nice to have some cash on hand, especially with daycare and mortgage.
Absolutely.
So, as you know.
Yeah. At some point reality hits, right?
Yeah.
Kids, mortgages, car payments, all that stuff. So having a little extra cash never hurts.
Yeah. No,
so,
the point you made earlier, I mean, one of my college strength coaches, like you said, when you're young, chase all these things. Like, you're single, you can move around, but like once you have a family, that changes priorities, changes things. Like,
yes.
So yeah, no, and I can attest to that.
Yeah, I love it, man. Well, Eric, this has been awesome, man. Really enjoyed having you on. I love talking about some stuff that, dude, 400 some episodes in, I don't think I've ever talked to a collegiate S&C coach about budgeting and some of these things. So I really appreciate your time. Where can my listeners find out more about you and the great work that you're doing at GW?
Yeah, my Instagram is it's just my name, Eric Guthrie 07. I think same thing on Twitter. It's a lot of Todd pictures, and then my kids, and then some training stuff. So those are probably the two big places. I do have a website, swiftrocktraining.com. I haven't done it with it yet, but hope to ramp that up in the next few years. But there is like a contact on there for programs or consulting. So
Perfect.
It's an honor being on. Yeah, I've read T-Nation articles for many, many years in your blog. So it's great to finally visit it. It was great to meet you, and then to be on. So
yeah, no, I love it, man. It's been fun as the show has evolved. People that have whatever learned or read my stuff, and now they're in positions like yours and making an impact. So it makes me feel like the trickle down effect is real, right?
Yeah.
So very cool. Well, again, Eric, thank you so much for your time, man. I really appreciate it.
Thanks.